Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate the latest developments, with chief focus on the Lebanese front, ongoing negotiations, of course, between Hezbollah and Israel, brokered by the United States to reach some sort of cessation of hostilities, alongside the decision by the ICC to prosecute, basically, to enact the arrest warrants for both Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, alongside the IAEA, where there is a draft resolution tabled with the bid of censoring the Islamic Republic of Iran for its breaches of its nuclear commitments and much more. But before all that, it's always important to remember how the war began. 412 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates in the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping some 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th of last year, Iran essentially joined the war when it greenlighted its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, Hezbollah had launched over 12,000 munitions towards Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional proxies under Iranian directives have launched direct attacks against Israel from Syria, from Iraq, from Yemen, including Iran proper, which has launched already twice direct attacks against Israel and is vocally poised on doing so again. Let's now turn to our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, as we have stated already before, every time we get a chance to speak about the hostages, we will do so at the get-go, and therefore let's talk right now about an attempt by Algiers, alongside the other 9 non-permanent members of the UN Security Council, tabling a draft resolution, namely S 2024-835, which basically called for an immediate implementation of a ceasefire, alongside and not in conjunction with a release of the hostages. The United States said that this is preposterous, that there is no link between the two. You have also mentioned your outrage about this yesterday, and thankfully the Biden administration decided to push back on this and veto the resolution, putting it in the dustbin of history. What can you tell us about that? And we'll start with that.
So it's another exercise in futility, because regardless of what the UN Security Council says, whether it does link the two issues, which of course are intertwined, it is impossible to set them apart, or as you mentioned, the resolution which was tabled and then defeated by the American veto, it has nothing to do with the way Hamas responds, or more realistically, does not respond at all. A few months ago, after the May 27 Biden proposal, the UN Security Council came out unanimously in support of it. Nothing happened. So all of these permanent representatives to the United Nations live high on the hog in Manhattan. They go to the building, they cast their votes, and they are very content to go back for happy hour downtown. But it has nothing to do with the plight of the hostages, which should have been, should always be the first item on the agenda. Now, as for the cessation of hostilities, this is not really an Israeli concession. This is something that Israel should aspire for. It has nothing else to achieve in Gaza except the release of the hostages and arranging for a better future for Gaza under an Israeli watch, security watch, so that the threat does not come back. But other than that, whatever happens in New York has nothing to do with Khan Yunis or Jabalia or Rafah.
Indeed. Well, let's turn to Madrid, Spain, where we're joined by Dr. Rafael Bardaji, formerly Spain's national security advisor, currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy. It's great to see you, Rafael. I'd
My
like
pleasure.
to
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is all ours, as usual. I'd like to immediately ask you also about this UN resolution, if you'd like to comment on that, but if not, that's also okay. We would also enjoy your insights on the IAEA, the E3, namely the United Kingdom, Germany, and France have tabled a joint draft resolution seeking to censor Iran and also urging the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi to launch a comprehensive report on Iran's breaches of its various, or not only breaches, but its non-compliance and no help in open investigations into plausible nuclear activities that occurred in undeclared sites. What can you tell us about that? And is that basically the Europeans saying we're preparing the ground for the enactment of snapback sanctions against the Islamic Republic, which is set to expire under UN Security Council Resolution 2331 in October of 25?
Well, Jonathan, let me say first that that is not a rupture, but a continuity on the European powers vis-à-vis Iran and the National Atomic Energy Agency. The three, the UK, France, and Germany, has been the hardliners compared to the Biden administration vis-à-vis the nuclear program in Iran. So that's a clear continuity. But I have to say also that this is an approach probably motivated by the change of administration and the change of presidency in the United States. The Europeans now believe that Trump may not be willing to get the United States directly involved in any attack against the nuclear program in Iran, but Trump may allow Israel to do whatever it takes to destroy the nuclear facilities. So I think it's a double motivation. One is the dynamics that have been set and rooted in the past, criticizing Iran non-compliance with the demands of the international community, but also a way to thwart any military action in the future. But having said that, it's much better than not to do anything or criticize the Trump administration approach, obviously.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to elsewhere here in Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Elik Shafir, formerly an Israel Air Force commander and fighter pilot. It's always a pleasure to have you, General. I'd like to immediately ask you, particularly on a couple of threats, basically, that emanated out of Tehran. The first by Islami, who met, of course, with his counterpart, the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, during the course of which he highlighted that if there would be a censor or a draft resolution that would be tabled and then adopted by the Board of Governors at the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Islamic Republic of Iran will react. One of those possibilities would be raising the enrichment levels to 90%, something that, of course, would raise the level to military grade materials, something that was subsequently also reinforced in multiple statements by the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. What would Israel do in the event of such a real escalation in which 90% obviously does not have any civic application and is purely military?
It's a good question, and the question is, will Iran do this? As far as many experts are concerned, the Iranian nuclear program is to be on the threshold, below the threshold, so that it uses the fact that it almost has a nuclear capability, but not go beyond this, as they assume that once they cross a certain threshold, the Saudis and the Egyptians will start seeking a comparable weapon, as they stand to be the arch enemies of the Iranians. And I'll just remind ourselves that the 1988 decision by Khomeini and his directive to his military was to develop a weapon of leverage. That was a result of the Iraq-Iran war, which Iran lost at the end after 8 years and wasn't directed towards Israel. And so their arch enemies are just across the bay and in Egypt rather than in Israel. Israel was taken later as a target, but not the essence of the program. So taking all that into account and not wanting to have sanctions by the U.S. And other and European countries, I don't think they will go beyond that point. But let's say that they do. The question remains, will the United States use power against Iran? I think we all understand it, at least as the President-elect Trump said, that, or did in the past, they will use economic sanctions, reintroduce them into the system, and they can block the Hormuz Straits. They can do many military, paramilitary deeds short of an actual attack. And then if that is so, the question remains, what can Israel do? Well, Israel can attack not the nuclear sites themselves, but the advancement of the weapon delivery system. For instance, in Fortune, by an example, the last attack was considered internationally as hitting their ability to develop the delivery system. This was not corroborated by Israeli media, or at least Israeli officials, but on the international scene, that was seen as a blow to their ability to reach a munition system with deliveries. So I would say that such acts can be retaken by Israel, reinforced by Israel, but probably not the attack on the nuclear plants themselves, as this would put Israel in an area, in a twilight zone, so to speak, and not being supported by other countries. And we should be careful on that one.
I'm not sure that other countries would not support Israel in this. They wouldn't be vocal about it, maybe, but Israel would.
What I meant to say that Israel alone cannot really take out the Iranian nuclear facilities. That would take a strategic air force such as the U.S. Air Force with B-1s and B-2s that can carry the type of weapons that needed for that kind of an attack. Just an example, the B-2 can carry a 25,000-pound bomb, whereas the F-15s, which are Israel's heaviest fighter, can carry something close to 3,000 pounds, 4,000 pounds, sorry. So the difference there insinuates on the ability to reach down into the nuclear plants, and I think I've said enough on that one.
Indeed, that's clear. Well, Mr. Oren, I'd like to ask you particularly about another development. The ICC has announced that it has now authorized or approved two warrants for Israeli Defense Minister, or former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and the current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What are we to make out of this? Naturally, this comes at a very peculiar time when the ICC's mandate remains in question.
So the three arrest warrants are padded in such a way that once Mohammed Deif, who is most probably dead, will be stricken off the list, former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant can be also taken out in the name of balance and fairness. And that would leave Netanyahu as the sole recipient or victim. of such a warrant. Now, obviously, all the anticipated remarks have been made about anti-Semitism and Dreyfus and all the rest. But the fact remains that there are too many countries in the world today who would be glad, in fact, the warrants, regardless of the doubts about the veracity of the charges or the standing of the court. So, of course, the United States would not, but Great Britain, it's quite clear, having talked with a most authoritative British diplomat earlier in the week, when the warrants were already in the air, about to land, he indicated that the policy of the UK government is to respect such warrants. And that means that for practical reasons, Prime Minister Netanyahu would be limited in the choice of destinations he can visit or even stop on his way to the United States. He will be essentially grounded for the time being. And even if President Trump, once in office, invites him to the White House, he will be much of a pariah around the world. It's a very hard blow for the entire state of Israel, even though not the entire state of Israel is to blame.
Dr. Bardachi, I'd like to hear your take on that. I mean, I'm honestly outraged, and I think this ICC is it has become the chamber of individuals who emanate out of totalitarian regimes to dictate to the democracies of the free civilization the manner in which it should conduct itself, and that just doesn't make sense. But what do you have to say about it?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, I think we should remind everyone that the international law and the ICC doesn't take into consideration why we fight, but only how is the fight conducted, which is a moral equivalence between terrorists and just warriors that should surprise and should say something to any goodwill person in the world. No? But secondly, I think all the charges put forward by the ICC are totally fabricated and grounded and approved of the double standards applied to Israel everywhere. I had the opportunity and the privilege to conduct a field visit to Gaza last July with a group of senior military officials, former defense chief of staff from different countries, and we conducted a thoroughly assessment of the humanitarian aid delivered or helped to be delivered by Israel. Yes, nobody is perfect. Urban warfare is a terrible thing, but we should not forget that Israel has been trying to limit the damage done to the civilians, and that the more responsible for all the civilian suffering in Gaza is Hamas. And that is taken into consideration by the ICC. So that's, I think, is disqualifying. And I think the ICC has done a very bad favor to the international law and to the laws of warfare. And I hope that this decision can be redressed by some powerful political leaders, like probably President-elect Trump, once in office. I think the ICC cannot reign for free when delivering such a kind of misapply international law to the conflict in the Middle East.
Come January 20th, and there were a few appointed individuals who are in their capacity right now as congressmen or senators still able to speak openly without breaching the Logan Act. They have noted that come January 20th, the consequences of the ICC's actions will come to bear. But General Shafir, I'd like to. We don't have very much time left. I'd like still to touch on the Lebanese file, since Amos Hochstein is right now in the country, the U.S. emissary for the current situation, the talks, of course, being mediated by the Americans. Where are we in reality? On the one hand, we hear from Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar that Israel remains resolute in its position about ensuring the enforcement of any outline that will be adopted in the next several days or weeks or months. And on the other hand, we hear in an address of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qassem, coming out and saying, well, they can ask whatever they want. They're not going to get it, because the flag of the resistance is still very much alive for Hezbollah and all Iranian proxies for that matter. What are we to make of it?
I think there is one logical outcome. Israel does not need the resolution in order to attack Hezbollah if it breaches the agreement. So why does it stand by or insist on the wording that it will allow it to do so? I suspect that it has to do with some kind of a leverage being taken for the Christians, the Sunnis, and the Druze in Lebanon, so that they can hold Hezbollah on a short leash. That is, in some way, collaborate with Israel in the power game in Lebanon, which, if I may remind, is in a kind of a standstill. They cannot choose a president. They cannot reach agreement. So I would venture to say, very without knowledge, it's just reading out what's in there, that the Lebanese need this more than Israel does. And we'll see in the in the 2 months that are left whether this is right and whether the leverage works. So I would say this is first of several rounds of boxing that will take place about this decision, and it's not really going to take place in a week or so, and we'll see what the U.S. stand on this one is.
Indeed. Well, it's important to point out that both the foreign minister of Damascus as well as the foreign minister and prime minister of Qatar both traveled to Iran for meetings with their Iranian counterpart Abbas al-Araghchi, during the course of which they did have extensive discussions about this matter. We don't have very much time left, and I'd like to grant each and every one of you the opportunity to give a little bit of insight. Where are we heading from here? Of course, feel free to speak about any topic that is on your mind right now. We'll start actually with Dr. Rafael Barraki.
Well, I think the whole world, including the Middle East, is waiting for President Trump to take office on January 20th, and that mere fact will change the equation in many places, from Europe to Ukraine to the Middle East. So let's wait and see what happens then.
And if I may ask, since you were very short, we still have about 45 seconds for you. The Red Sea, we're seeing there now Turkey, after having one of its vessels being targeted by the Houthis, is now threatening to launch a campaign against this Iranian proxy, the Ansar Allah. The Houthis, of course, respond with their own rhetoric. But what are we to make out of the latest developments there?
Well, I couldn't say that, but I'm going to say anyway. I'm glad that the Turk vote was attacked. I think that will make people realize what it's all about on the sea lines of communication by the Houthis, Iran proxies in the region, and that should have been taken out of the picture much more early than that. But let's hope that in the future, the international community will face the challenge emanating from Iran through Yemen.
Indeed. General Shafir?
I think the Ukraine war will be number one target on the list for Trump, and the deal that will be struck between Trump and Putin will have a lot of influence on the way the Russians behave in Iran and in Syria, and in turn will actually have the capability to pacify this area of the world by subduing Iran, which is one of the greater interests of the Americans. And so I would say that rather than Lebanon first for Trump, it'll be Ukraine first and then Iran.
Mr. Oren, you have 1 minute.
In the Middle East, practical arrangements or practice on the ground, they are more important than the theoretical formula or the legal framework. And because of that, even though, of course, for domestic audiences, it's important to show some sort of document, if Israel gets from the United States a commitment that Israel can impose its dominance over Lebanon from the air, intelligence-wise, and in other aspects, this is good enough. It is better than waiting for the perfect document to be annotated and signed.
Indeed. Well, this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank General Relik Shafir, Dr. Rafael Bardachi, and Mr. Amir Oren for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.
I'm Eran Etzion, former Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel, a diplomat, a strategist by training. I'm very happy to be at TV7 and offer my interpretation along my esteemed colleagues. The strong point of TV7 is to be a reliable source of authoritative insight in an era of shallow news environment that is very difficult for viewers to trust.